It started like any other quiet afternoon in a peaceful suburban neighborhood until things took a sharp turn. A local farmer, quiet and unassuming, was out in his yard tending to his garden when two aggressive HOA enforcers approached. They claimed his old fence was 2 inches over the line. He tried to reason with them, politely explaining he'd lived there for years and meant no harm. But things escalated fast. The enforcers, used to throwing their weight around, decided to make an example out of him. What they didn't know: this simple farmer wasn't just a quiet man with soil on his boots. He was a retired Navy commander with a past full of discipline, training, and secrets. The situation boiled over when one of the HOA men got physical. That's when something in the farmer's eyes changed. It wasn't fear. It was focus. Years of tactical experience rising to the surface. No one in that neighborhood knew who he really was. They only saw the hat, the boots, the garden. But behind that calm stare was a man who'd led missions across the globe. What happened next wasn't just about a fence. It was about respect, boundaries, and the danger of pushing the wrong person too far. And just when you think it's over, it's only getting started. Nobody really paid attention to the farmer when he moved into the neighborhood a year ago. He kept to himself, paid his dues, and never caused any trouble. Folks just saw an older man with weathered hands and quiet eyes, always out early with a rake or watering can. The HOA didn't like his style, though. They wanted uniformity, neatly trimmed lawns, matching paint colors, and fences exactly where the rules said they should be. To them, he was just another homeowner stepping out of line. But behind that quiet routine was a man who once led elite operations overseas, trained to stay calm under fire and read danger before it struck. His name wasn't on any neighborhood Facebook group, but it was etched into plaques on naval bases half a world away. He wasn't hiding who he was. He just didn't feel the need to prove it. The two HOA enforcers weren't part of the official board, just volunteers who took their authority a little too seriously. They'd been warned before about being overly aggressive, but this time they chose the wrong target. The farmer didn't flinch when they raised their voices. He just stood there, measuring them, not with fear, but with calculation. And somewhere, deep inside, the switch had already flipped. They just hadn't realized it yet. The tension didn't ease after that afternoon. It only spread. Word got around the neighborhood fast. Some people whispered about the incident. Others dismissed it as another HOA power trip. But a few residents started noticing strange things. The farmer's property, once ignored, was suddenly under surveillance. HOA notices kept showing up on his door, complaints about weeds, minor cracks in the driveway, even the color of his mailbox. It felt targeted, but the farmer, he didn't react. He kept tending his garden, fixing what he needed to, saying little. That calm made people uneasy. It was like watching a storm gather without a single gust of wind. Behind the scenes, the HOA board was split. A couple of members started questioning the enforcers' behavior, especially after they learned the farmer had a military background. One member, Laura, a young woman new to the board, decided to look into it more. What she found made her pause. The man had once commanded high-level naval operations. His record was spotless, his service honorable, and it made her wonder why someone like him would settle here, in a quiet neighborhood with overzealous rules. Meanwhile, the enforcers weren't backing down. They felt challenged, and their pride wouldn't let it go. To them, this was about control. But for the farmer, this was starting to feel like a familiar kind of battlefield, just with different weapons. The air in the neighborhood started to shift. What once felt like a quiet suburb now buzzed with unease. The farmer, still calm on the surface, had begun to take quiet steps. He started waking up earlier, walking the perimeter of his property with more purpose. A few neighbors noticed security cameras going up, subtle, tucked into corners, but definitely there. And at night, a light stayed on in the shed out back. Something was changing. Laura, the HOA board member, tried to warn the others. She told them this wasn't someone to provoke, not because he was dangerous, but because he was trained to handle pressure in ways they couldn't imagine. But the enforcers wouldn't listen. They were planning something, a surprise inspection, they called it. They wanted to catch him in some sort of violation, anything that could justify a fine or even push for removal. What they didn't know was that the farmer had seen it coming. His instincts were sharp. He'd been in situations like this before, just under different flags and in far more dangerous places. But pressure is pressure, no matter where it comes from. The night before the inspection, Laura knocked on his door. She looked nervous. "They're coming tomorrow," she said. The farmer gave a small nod, like he already knew. Then he looked out over the quiet street and said, "Let them." The next morning came heavy with tension. A black SUV with tinted windows rolled slowly into the neighborhood, clearly not the usual HOA vehicle. The two enforcers stepped out, smug and confident, clipboards in hand, acting like they owned the street. But what caught everyone off guard was the third man who followed behind them. He wasn't part of the HOA. He wore a suit, had a military-style haircut, and didn't smile once. No one knew who he was, but the farmer did. From behind his garden gate, the farmer watched them approach, his expression unreadable. The suited man locked eyes with him for just a second, just enough to say this visit wasn't only about a fence. That's when things shifted. This wasn't just an HOA issue anymore. There was something bigger at play. Something from the farmer's past was being stirred up, and it wasn't coincidence that this man had shown up now. Inside his house, the farmer's old military case was open on the table, files, documents, and an old medal polished the night before. He hadn't touched any of it in years. Whatever this was, it wasn't just about property lines anymore. Laura, watching from across the street, knew something was wrong. Deeply wrong. And as the group walked up the driveway, the farmer quietly locked the gate behind him. The showdown was no longer just about the HOA. It was personal now. The three men reached the gate, but the farmer didn't move to open it. Instead, he stepped forward, calm but firm. "You're not here about a fence," he said, eyes fixed on the man in the suit. The enforcers looked confused, but the suited man gave a slow nod. "You were off the grid for years," he said quietly, "but someone's been asking questions. Higher-level security flagged your name." The farmer didn't flinch. "I told you when I left, I was done." But the man in the suit leaned in. "Then why are your old files unlocked? Why were you in contact with Commander Wren 3 weeks ago?" Laura, now standing near the curb, heard everything. She looked at the farmer, trying to piece together who he really was. This wasn't just a retired Navy man with a quiet life. This was someone still carrying pieces of a past the rest of them couldn't begin to understand. Just then, one of the enforcers, still trying to act in control, shoved past the gate. But before he could speak, the farmer raised his voice for the first time. "That's enough." His tone dropped the temperature in the air. Everyone stopped. The enforcer froze, realizing he'd crossed a line he didn't understand. The suited man nodded slowly. "We're done here for now." But as they turned to leave, he slipped a small black envelope into the farmer's hand. Later that night, under a dim porch light, the farmer opened it. Inside was a photo, grainy, time-stamped and recent. It showed someone from his past. Someone who should have been gone. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. The porch light flickered as the farmer studied the photo. His jaw tightened, not in fear, but in recognition. The man in the picture had once been part of his team, thought to be lost in a mission gone wrong. If he was alive and reaching out now, it meant something bigger was moving beneath the surface. The visit from the suited man hadn't been a warning, it was a signal. By morning, the HOA enforcers backed off. Laura, now aware of the full weight of the situation, quietly stepped down from the board. She left a note for the farmer. Asterisk, "I don't know what's coming, but thank you for protecting us in ways we'll never understand." Asterisk, the neighborhood slowly returned to normal, but the whispers never stopped. The man they thought was just a quiet gardener had become something more in their eyes, something respected, even feared. Back inside, the farmer packed away his old files, carefully sealing the envelope with the photo. He wasn't running, he was preparing. Whatever storm was coming, he'd be ready, like always. And as he walked back into his yard, hands in the dirt once again, the world might have seemed just a farmer. But now, they knew better.